Welcome, restless dreamer. You've just stepped into the shadows of sleep, where stories whisper and the darkness listens. I'm your guide tonight, your voice in the void, here to lead you gently into nightmares wrapped in lullabies. Before we begin, press like if you're brave enough, and subscribe for more midnight tales that blur the line between sleep and terror. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what hour has found you? Daniel always said the city had made him hollow. The noise, the pollution, the constant grinding of people and traffic. It wore him down in ways he couldn't quite explain. Mara felt the same. Their small apartment, crammed between two busy streets, made her art feel like an afterthought, something she squeezed into corners rather than lived in. So when they found the cottage, it felt like an answer. It sat at the end of a narrow lane, surrounded by fields that stretched toward low, wooded hills. No neighbors except for a single old barn slouching on the property line. The real estate agent brushed it off. Belongs to an old family, hasn't been touched in years. He said it with a smile that didn't quite meet his eyes. Mara liked the look of the barn at first. The weathered boards gave it character, she thought, like something from one of her paintings. But as they unloaded the moving van, she noticed the windows, every single one boarded from the inside, and for the briefest moment, she swore she saw one of those boards shift, as if someone inside had leaned against it to look out. When she told Daniel, he laughed. Probably just the wind. It was a good first week. Quiet. The air smelled of grass and wood smoke from a far-off farm. Mara painted on the porch. Daniel typed at the little desk in the corner, occasionally glancing out the window at the rolling green fields. At night, the silence felt almost heavy, dense enough that their voices seemed to fall flat in the air. But by the second week, they both noticed it. At dusk, when the sun slid low and the sky took on that bruised purple glow, everything seemed to hold its breath. Birds went quiet, the wind dropped, and the barn seemed to lean a little closer toward the cottage, the dark gaps between its boards yawning wider. One morning, Daniel found the barn's door hanging open. He closed it, latching the rusty hook, and forgot about it. The next morning, it was open again. The latch was still intact, but the door hung ajar, creaking slightly in the breeze. Then the carvings appeared. They started small, irregular lines and jagged shapes etched into the wood of the fence that ran along the barn. Not letters, not anything recognizable. Mara took pictures, thinking they might be old farmers' marks, but each morning fresh markings appeared, carved roughly as if with a sharp blade. Late one evening, Mara sat outside with a cup of tea. Through the gap in the boards, she saw movement, a pale shape shifting just inside the barn. It wasn't fast, and it wasn't trying to hide. It stood there, unmoving, the faint suggestion of a face catching the moonlight. "Daniel," she whispered. By the time he came outside, the gap was empty. The storm rolled in without warning, a sudden churn of black clouds and sharp rain. It battered the roof all night, and when they woke the next morning, the barn door wasn't just open, it was wide open. A length of frayed rope stretched from the darkness inside, across the wet grass, up onto their back porch. Daniel followed it. Inside the barn, the air was damp and heavy with a smell that made his stomach turn. Earth and something faintly metallic. The floor was covered in scattered hay, but it wasn't random. The pieces formed rough, circular patterns, the centers bare. Foot-shaped impressions, damp and dark, led from the far wall toward a boarded-up loft above. Daniel froze when he heard it, scratching, soft at first, then stopping as soon as he tilted his head to listen. He backed out slowly, eyes on the loft. Mara was waiting on the porch, pale-faced. Neither spoke for the rest of the morning. It happened 3 days later. Daniel went into town for supplies, leaving Mara to paint. She had just set down her brush when she heard the floor creak. "Daniel?" she called. No answer. The sound moved down the hall, toward the living room. Mara's skin prickled. She hurried to the front door, only to find it locked, not from the inside, but with the heavy bolt they used at night. the one you could only set from outside. Her heart thudded. When Daniel returned an hour later, she was sitting in the kitchen, shaking. She led him through the house. Every mirror in the bathroom, the hallway, their bedroom, was covered in foggy handprints. Not one of them matched hers or Daniel's. The roof and the floorboards. That night, the sounds began. At 2:14 a.m., heavy footsteps paced across the roof. The rhythm was slow, deliberate, then silence. The next night, muffled noises rose from beneath the floorboards. At first it was just sound, but eventually the words became clear enough to understand. "We are here." Daniel slammed his palm against the floor. The whispering stopped. 3 dull thuds echoed back from directly below. The next day, they checked beneath the cottage. There was nothing but packed soil, just solid earth. By the end of the month, neither of them could sleep. The barn door seemed to open more often than it stayed shut. Daniel snapped one morning, grabbing a crowbar and heading across the field. Mara followed, recording on her phone. Inside, the smell was worse. Wet earth, rot, and something else he couldn't name. Rotting furniture slumped in corners. Scattered on the dirt floor were small shoes, broken mugs, and curled black and white photographs. In the loft, straw dolls hung nailed to the walls in a perfect circle, each facing inward. The straw figures had dark, tangled fibers for hair. A half-burned journal lay in the corner. Its entries were erratic, frantic. They existed before this land was first worked. They linger at the boundaries, waiting for a way in. Do not meet their eyes. That night, the loft window's board hung loose. Mara was the first to see them. At 3 a.m., she woke to the feeling of being watched. When she pulled back the curtain, a pale face stared in. Its skin was stretched, its eyes too large, too dark. It didn't blink. Daniel joined her at the window, and the figure backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact, until it vanished into the barn's shadow. By morning, the symbols on the fence had been carved deep enough to splinter the wood. 2 nights later, light flickered in the barn's loft. It shouldn't have been possible. There was no electricity. That same night, Mara dreamed she was in the barn, surrounded by whispering shapes. One stepped forward, holding out a frayed rope. When she woke, that same rope lay at the foot of their bed. Daniel said they were leaving. They packed quickly, but the car wouldn't start. Their phones read, "No service." It began with the footsteps on the roof. Then the banging started, on every wall, in perfect rhythm. The whispering turned into a hum, deep and constant. Daniel pulled the curtains aside. Dozens of shadowed shapes stood in the yard, arms spread wide, heads tilted back, as if in some grotesque welcome. One stepped forward. Its mouth barely moved as it spoke. "You belong with us now." Daniel looked past them toward the barn. He understood then. The barn wasn't just old. It had been here before the land was cleared, before the cottage was built. The figures turned toward it, moving in slow unison. The chant swelled. Weeks later, a young couple followed a realtor up the overgrown path to the same cottage. "It's peaceful here," the realtor said. "Private." In the distance, the boards on the barn shifted slightly. A pale face peered out. "I didn't move here for the sea breeze, or the promise of quiet streets lined with swaying lampposts. I moved here to disappear. After ending things with Rowan, my former roommate, friend, and something far darker, I wanted to put as much distance as possible between us. We'd lived together for 3 years, and in that time, they managed to carve themselves into every part of my daily life. It wasn't just the constant texts when I was out, or the way they accidentally overheard my phone calls. It was smaller, sharper things. How they could turn a harmless phrase into something loaded. How they always seemed to know what I was thinking before I said it. When I finally left, I did everything you're supposed to do. Changed my number, wiped my social media, found a furnished studio in a town where the ocean roars like it's trying to erase everything. I thought I could finally breathe here. For the first few weeks, it worked. I unpacked, walked along the pier, even found a little coffee shop that made the kind of cinnamon muffins Rowan always hated. Every morning I'd sit there with a book, feeling the fog lift from my head. Then one morning, the barista, someone I'd never seen before, handed me my drink and said, "Good morning." I smiled politely, thinking nothing of it, until 2 days later, when the man fixing my sink asked without looking up, "Do you still keep your shoes under the bed?" My mouth went dry. That was something Rowan once commented on after snooping in my room. And just like the barista, the plumber had no reason to know it. It didn't stop there. In the weeks that followed, strangers would drop fragments of my old life into conversation like stones into water. Small, sharp, sinking straight to the bottom of me. "Do you still chew the ends of your coffee stirrers?" asked a jogger who stopped beside me on the pier. "I thought you didn't like rain," murmured a woman in the grocery aisle. Sometimes they didn't even look at me when they said it. Sometimes they smiled, like they were delivering a line they'd been told to say. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe Rowan had somehow found people I knew, people who'd told these strangers things about me. But each phrase was too specific, too exact. They weren't just repeating facts, they were performing memories. The first time I tried confronting someone, it was a delivery driver. He'd brought a package I hadn't ordered, handed it to me, and as I signed said, "Do you still bite your lip when you're nervous?" "Where'd you hear that?" I asked. He smiled faintly, then turned and walked away without another word. That was when I started keeping a notebook. Every phrase, every face, dates, times, locations. At first it seemed random, different people, different settings. But then I noticed something. They all tilted their heads the same way when they spoke. Not much, just a fraction to the right. And they all paused, like they were waiting for me to react. One night, I came home from the pier to find my apartment wrong, subtly wrong. The mugs were in a different cupboard. My chair was angled toward the window, not the desk. The stack of sketchbooks I kept on the floor was rearranged, the top one open to a page I hadn't drawn in months. Rowan used to fix my place like that. They said it made things more functional. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, every light on, listening. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, muffled conversation outside my door, then quick footsteps retreating. The next morning, the bookstore owner downstairs mentioned that someone had been looking for me. "What friend?" I asked. She shrugged, didn't give a name, left when I started asking questions. After that, the encounters multiplied. I'd be walking down the street, and a man on the opposite sidewalk would mouth one of Rowan's phrases without making a sound. A child on the pier hummed a tune Rowan once made up. Even in the most ordinary interactions, there was always that head tilt, that pause. It wasn't just about seeing them anymore. It was about looking for them, scanning every face, bracing for the words. One night, I woke to faint murmurs in my apartment. I froze, listening. The voices were just outside my bedroom door. I live alone. They stopped when I moved. I turned on the lamp, heart pounding, and there it was, a folded piece of paper on the floor. In neat, almost printed handwriting, "We're ready to begin." The words were underlined twice in blue ink. The next morning, I checked the security camera feed for my building. The footage for that hour was gone, replaced by a loop of an empty hallway. I decided to leave. I packed in one frantic night, stuffing clothes into bags, grabbing my sketchbooks, ignoring the way my hands shook. I didn't care where I ended up, anywhere but here. The town was quiet when I walked to the bus station. Too quiet. The fog was thick, curling around the streetlights. Halfway there, a man leaning against a lamppost called out, "Careful, sea air can make you forget things." I kept walking. A woman stepping out of a bakery. Still walking like you're late for something. A man on a bench. Don't hide behind your sketches. It wasn't just one or two of them anymore. It was everyone. Every face I passed, every voice I heard. A different phrase from Rowan's repertoire. Their delivery was perfect. Eye contact, head tilt, smile. At the station, I climbed onto the bus, shoving my bag into the overhead rack. I didn't even look at the driver until he spoke. "Ready for your last stop?" I turned. His smile was the same as all the others. And then the passengers, every single one, turned in unison to look at me, smiling, waiting. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember the bus pulling away. I only remember the sound, low, rhythmic, almost like soft laughter. And I think it's still happening, even now, because last night, in a motel 2 towns over, the front desk clerk handed me my key and said, "Good morning." I'd never been to the Great Lakes before. My family wasn't a vacation family. We didn't take trips unless it was for weddings, funerals, or the occasional long drive to see relatives. So when my aunt suggested we rent a place just for fun, it felt off. Not that I minded the idea. Everyone seemed excited. The cousins blew up the group chat with bad memes about lake monsters and promises of bonfires and night swims. My parents just smiled, and I could tell it had been a long time since they'd looked forward to anything together. The place we found online looked too good to be true. A big house on the edge of the lake, with its own dock and a smaller guest house out back for overflow guests. It was cheap, almost suspiciously cheap, but my aunt brushed it off. "It's the off-season," she said. "That's why." We pulled in on a bright afternoon, tires crunching over the gravel driveway. The lake stretched out beyond the trees, its surface flashing like shards of broken glass under the sun. The air smelled sharp and clean, but something about the silence was wrong, like the whole area was holding its breath. The main house was picture perfect. Wide porch, tall windows, a faint smell of lemon cleaner. The guest house, though, "That's ours," Maria said, smirking at me, Nikki, and Joel. It looked less like a guest house and more like a forgotten outbuilding. The paint peeled in long curls. A single bulb hung above the door, unlit. When I opened the door, stale air hit me like a wall, damp carpet, mildew, something faintly metallic. The windows were cloudy, the glass smeared as if someone had tried to wipe them with greasy hands. Light bulbs flickered overhead, casting a dull yellow over furniture that belonged in a thrift store reject pile. The bedroom smelled faintly of old laundry left wet too long. There was a bathroom, but the carpet in there was the same as the living room, and it squished unpleasantly underfoot. "Charming," Joel muttered. It was only for sleeping, though. During the day, we had the beach. The first afternoon was fine. Better than fine, actually. The lake went on forever, the horizon dissolving into haze. The water was freezing, but we still dared each other to wade in. We grilled dinner, played card games, took turns telling ridiculous ghost stories. For a while, I forgot about the guest house. The first night, we all piled into the 2 small bedrooms. The sheets smelled like dust and detergent from a decade ago, so I decided to wash them before sleeping. The laundry room was in the downstairs utility space of the same building. The washer and dryer were small and slow. I could only do 1 set of sheets at a time, so I spent hours hauling laundry up and down the creaky wooden stairs. By the last load, it was past 2 in the morning. The others were sprawled across their mattresses, half asleep, phones glowing faintly in their hands. I set the last set of warm sheets on Maria's bed and sat on mine, scrolling through nothing. That's when the first bang hit. It wasn't a knock. It was a crash, deep, metallic, and heavy, slamming into the garage door downstairs with such force that the floor seemed to jump. I froze, listening. Silence. Then another, louder, so hard the bed frame rattled. I glanced around, but the others were still half asleep. My pulse thudded in my ears. The third crash woke Maria and Nikki at the same time. "What the hell was that?" Maria whispered. "It's been happening," I told her. "You didn't hear the first ones?" Joel sat up. "Wind?" "No," I said, maybe too quickly. "That's not wind." Nikki texted her mom in the main house. Less than 5 minutes later, I heard hurried footsteps outside. The door opened, and my uncle stood there with my dad and 2 older cousins. His face was tight. "Pack your stuff," he said. "Now!" We didn't argue. Within minutes, We were back in the main house, the guest house light left blazing behind us. Only once we were inside with the door locked, did my uncle explain. He'd come around the side of the garage and found a man standing perfectly still behind it, half in shadow. He wasn't moving, wasn't speaking, just staring. When my uncle took a step toward him, the man didn't flinch. He didn't turn away. He just seemed to fade, as if the shadows swallowed him whole. When they checked, there were no footprints in the dirt, just the fresh ones from our family. That should have been enough for me to demand we leave, but we stayed. The grown-ups said maybe it was a local messing with us, or a trick of the light. But that same night, Joel found something on the coffee table in the guest house. A playing card. A jester. The design was wrong, though. The jester's smile was too wide. Its eyes black pits. We hadn't been playing cards. The second night, we were all in the main house. I slept on the living room floor. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke to the sound of slow, deliberate footsteps on the porch. I didn't get up. Neither did my mom, who was lying on the couch near the front windows. But I could feel her breathing change. The steps stopped right in front of the glass. I wanted to look. I didn't. A few seconds later, the basement door rattled hard, as if someone was trying to force it open. It went on for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped. When the men in the basement checked, no one was outside. We left the next afternoon. No one said it outright, but we all knew we weren't coming back. The host never sent any footage. I stopped thinking about it after a few weeks, until the package came. Small, no return address. Inside, just a single card. The same jester, smiling wider than I remembered.